This is a squad support weapon, the Browning automatic rifle. This is the 1918 A2. The original one, developed at the tail end of the Great War, was semi-automatic, meaning one bullet per trigger pull, and full automatic, meaning it'll keep firing so long as the trigger's depressed and you got ammunition. This guy, 2 mounts of full auto only. 450 rounds a minute slow, 650 rounds a minute fast, which is slower than most of our enemy's machine guns. It's not a machine gun though, it's an automatic rifle. The barrel does not quickly detach and change from the receiver, so if you, for prolonged use, you will warp the barrel. So you fire in short bursts. The idea is the guy with this weapon will fire bursts, and that's why they added the bipod, to suppress the enemy, while the men with the rifles and grenades hook around the side, flank them where his defenses aren't as good, and take him out. Now early in the war, there was a BAR squad that supported the rifle squad. You had 9 men with rifles, and 3 of those squads made a platoon with a headquarters, and a 9-man BAR squad. They had 2 BARs with one extra one in reserve. They found they were taking all 3 of those BARs, splitting them into 3-man teams, and attaching them to the rifle squads. So the Marines E went to a 12-man squad with a BAR in it, like the Army. And then they found at the close ranges in the jungles, that wasn't sufficient. They went to 2 BARs for a 12-man squad. So you'd have a 3-man BAR team, the gunner, an assistant who's also trained on the weapon and will become the gunner if the gunner goes down, and an ammunition bearer. All 3 of those guys had the BAR magazine belt with extra ammo for this rifle with it chews through it, and that team would then support the 3 riflemen, and you had 2 of those splitting the 12-man squad into 6-man teams, times a 3-man. And then that evolved to having 4-man fire teams, corporal, a rifleman with grenade launcher, an auto rifleman, and an assistant. You'd have 3 of those rifle teams under a sergeant. That's how we finish out the war. So, similar function to the M1. It's got the gas tube under the barrel. When the gunpowder is ignited by the primer, the firing pin strikes the primer, causes that ignition. Gunpowder forces the projectile down the barrel. That gas pressure pushing the bullet is vented down here.
So listen. Yeah. So the bullet comes out.
There's a piston in here, like in a car engine, and it drives that piston backwards. That's attached to the bolt. So the bolt extracts the spent shell. Once it hits the ejector, it kicks it out, and then as it's riding forward, it strips the next round off the magazine in, and that's where this is a little different than the M1. This will keep firing as long as you have the trigger pulled. Nothing will catch that bolt, so the spring pulls it forward, the hammer strikes the firing pin, and it just keeps going until you're out of ammo or let go of the trigger. We fired, like I said, semi and full auto in the trenches, so I would be firing the semi-automatic from the shoulder in the trenches, while the guys with the 1903s would be operating the bolts. The idea actually was that they were coming up with a device to replace the bolt on the 1903 rifle called the Peterson device. And this would, you pull the bolt out, put it in the case, put the Peterson device in, and it took a 40-round magazine sticking out the side, turned it into a 30 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The idea was when you're going over the top, you would extend this out further, and it could rig across your shoulder, and you would fire in bursts, crossing no man's land, from the hip in full auto, and then those guys with the Peterson device could just pop, 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 and spray the trenches. Well, the war ended, Peterson device was scrapped. This was still in the armory. Fast forward to the 1930s, this is in the armory. They folded it into the table of organization equipment, TOE, like I said, and they said, well, you know what? We're going to use this kind of like the machine guns. We don't need a machine gun. So they came up with this hinged butt plate, which would go over the shoulder, and they came up with the bipod. And the idea was you could still fire from the hip, you could still aim and fire from the shoulder, but the idea was I would come into a position, deploy the bipod, my assistant gunner and my ammo bearer would be on either side of me with extra ammunition, but they have M1 rifles. So I would fire. I've got the adjustable rear sight for long range, but I would fire when empty, press the magazine release in there, pull this out, grab another magazine, slap it in, and on a full auto, this one's a semi-auto replica, the full auto, the bolt would lock back. I'd actually do that first. So it's a little different loading procedure with the semi. And the bolt would be locked back like that, and when I put the new magazine in, as soon as I pull the trigger, that would do that and it would start firing until I let go of the trigger, and then the bolt would lock open. That allows air to cool the barrel. So from the bipod, it's actually easier to reload because you just turn it, press the release, pull the mag out, you can even leave it there, slap another one in. But we want to retain these. We can't just throw them away like they do in the movies, because I'm only issued so many of these. I get my ammunition on stripper clips like the Japanese ammo is,
and then I have to feed it into here to reload my magazines. Ready? Prep! Port, arm! Inspection, arm!